Hello, and welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and I'm especially delighted today to welcome back one of my favorite authors, Sherry Thomas, who's here to talk about the latest in her Lady Sherlock series, Miss Moriarty, I presume. Before we begin our chat, I do want to let those listening in know that we have copies of Sherry's book available at the Poison Pen, and we are happy to send a copy out to you by mail or hold one for you to pick up at the store. Just give us a call at the Poison Pen or go online, and we can set copies aside for you. Now I'd like to welcome Sherry Thomas.
Hello, John. It's so lovely to see you again.
It is delightful to have you back, even if just virtually at the Poison Pen. Let's start a little bit our chat first by talking about yourself before you became a writer. You have kind of a fascinating life story.
I do, although I've told it so many times at this point, I forgot what's fascinating about it. I think one. Are you speaking of the fact that I came from China and did not grow up speaking English, but in the end, yes, I only came here. I only came to the States at age 13. I think you can still hear the accent when I speak, although I often joke that I speak with one, but I don't write with an accent. And I learned English reading romance and science fiction. Mystery was actually didn't think I read too much mystery when I was a teenager. And then when I was a very young stay-at-home mom at about age 23, one day I read a book that disagreed with me. So like basically in the time of an afternoon, I decided I'm also going to start writing books.
Well, you never really thought about becoming a writer up until then, because I think you said you came from a family of scientists and engineers. So
that is correct. I mean, it's not like I never thought about it, but I think the last time before I was 23 and I seriously thought about it, I was like half that age. It was like in 5th grade. I thought I would like to be a writer of children's literature for a hot minute there. Around the same time, I also thought I would like to be an astrophysicist. Turned out I didn't like physics very much. I'm okay in lower math, but I didn't like physics all that much. So I never seriously thought about writing before that one afternoon when everything changed.
And that was your start as a writer. So you proceeded to write a book, but you were not an overnight sensation. It took a while.
No, I was actually a couple of days ago, Deanna Rayburn and I had a conversation, and I just randomly asked her, how many years, because this was in the Jurassic era. I was like, how many years did you take to get published? She said 14 years. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, it's so rare that I encounter somebody who took longer than I did. I thought I was on the outer, on the outer limit of what's endurable for an unpublished writer. But no, apparently I was by far from
Well, it was a bit different back then, because indie publishing and things like that were not really an option. It was
no, it wasn't at all. No, I think John Grisham was the only person we'd ever heard of who had like at some point being a self-publisher, and we would hear about how he would have his copies of his book in the trunk of his car and go around, and it just all sounded like such a kind of terrifying way to sell books. So I think we were all just like strapped down and try to see whether we could get somebody else to do the work for us. It really has changed in the years since.
So you proceeded to write your first book, which was Private Arrangements, when it was published.
It was a historical romance. I started out in historical romance.
You wrote a number of books in that genre, and then you did some young adult novels. And what made you decide, I want to write a mystery? What did you think?
Partly because I was running out of ideas for historical romances. I have a fear of repeating myself. I think there are authors who love telling variations of one story. And I have always wanted to become one of those, because I feel like in that case, then if you like to write it and the readers love to read it, and then every time you come up with a new story, it's exactly what they want to read again, except slightly different so it's fresh. But I've never been that kind of writer. So once I've written something, I don't want to write it again. And I was running out of ideas. And around that time, BBC Sherlock came along. I've been wanting to write my own take on Sherlock Holmes for a while, and that finally kicked my desire into action. So I was like, I really want to do this. And the idea of writing a female Sherlock Holmes, it just seemed like there's lots of possibilities if you take that premise to all its logical conclusions. So I approached my publisher, and they surprisingly, without any modification, said yes. Which I've often said I attribute it to the rise of self-publishing and the fact that lots and lots of romance writers were leaving lots of publishers in droves at that point because they could strike out on their own and do really well. And so publishers were like eager to retain authors, which was how I, without much effort, I managed to switch genres because at least I was willing to remain with my publisher.
Now, Sherlock Holmes is kind of the star of your series.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about her, because in some ways she's a mirror of Sherlock Holmes, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's creation. In other ways, you kind of flip switches and make her different.
That is correct. I think in the end, first of all, anyone who has read the Lady Sherlock books would know that Charlotte is almost a physical opposite of Sherlock Holmes. That was a very early decision. I had at first, I mean, when I first started to write these books, the very first draft, the very first book, she was like basically a carbon copy, a physical carbon copy of the male Sherlock Holmes, like the Jeremy Brett. If you think about what Jeremy Brett would look like as a woman, I was trying to describe that. And I just thought, this is not very interesting. And I thought, well, it would be much more fun if she's somebody who you just look at her and you would not, immediately suspect her of housing such a surgical increment of a brain in her head. So I kind of turned the other way. I made her very, very like kind of rolly-poly and very adorable looking, and is very much into fashion and slightly odd fashion at that. Kind of very kind of distracting kind of fashion. So you would never think by looking at her that this woman would take one look at you and know your entire life's history. So that was one change I made. And the other, very naturally, because the books are set in the time of the original Sherlock Holmes. And so if Sherlock Holmes, with his mind and his temperament, had been born a woman, I think there will be some changes along the way. There will be some challenges along the way he will encounter that he never encountered as a man. And so I asked myself, what would such a mind and such a temperament become growing up, faced with all the constraints that a man never would have to face, faced with all the people who want her not to be what she is, and with only she and very few other people in her corner saying, sure, get up, be who you are. What would that become? And so it's kind of like interesting mirror image, but also kind of like warped mirror image.
Well, another way that she kind of differs from Sherlock is the original Sherlock, he can take a case or not. Correct. What he wants to do is it's a whim to him, but for Charlotte, it's a job. She pretty much has to do.
That is the way she has to support herself and to make money enough to support her sisters, whom she hoped all to be living with her at one point in the future. I did not give her the luxury of basically shooting up the 7% solution of cocaine. only take those cases that that really interest her. She, like in the first book, this was established very very strongly that she's like, she doesn't care. She will go out and as long as there's a few good shillings to be made, she'll go out and she'll find your lost ring or lost anything.
Yeah. And that kind of is a segue into your current book, Miss Moriarty, I presume, because Charlotte is presented with a case that she'd like to turn down, but she can't really.
That's correct. She can't really.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
The book actually is an outgrowth of a decision I made fairly early in the writing of these books. In fact, before I ever wrote a word, I often don't know much about stories going in, but one decision I had made long ago regarding these books was that I would not get rid of Moriarty too early. In fact, I was so hesitant about overusing Moriarty, of like getting rid of him too early. I didn't even want to bring him on screen too early. But I figure, 6 books in, we need to see Moriarty now. And so Moriarty comes on stage for the first time as a speaking, acting character. But I also didn't want to bring him in to immediately like confront Sherlock Holmes as a villain. So I thought, what would be an interesting way for him to come on stage? Oh, what if he came as a client? That is something I don't think I have. I mean, obviously, I have not read everything in the pastiche, so I can't say if somebody else has done this, but I have not seen it. So I thought this would be different. So I brought. So Moriarty comes, and he comes as a seemingly very nice man who has a problem for Charlotte in that he isn't sure what has happened to his daughter. His daughter has chosen to live among a community of occult practitioners in a remote coastal compound, and he isn't sure that she is still alive or well. So he wants Charlotte to check it out, to go there and figure out what's going on with his daughter, with Miss Moriarty.
Now, this particular group studied, I guess their icon or their figure is Hermes Trismegistus, and I know I'm getting that wrong, but this is actually rooted in history. Tell us a little bit about
that. That is correct. The gentleman in question is actually considered a pagan prophet, almostly. It was pre-Christian, and he was supposedly this kind of synergy between the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, and his name is mentioned a lot in alchemist writings. And so at one point I was wondering whether to have these people actually try to transmute the lead into gold in his books. Turned out that wasn't quite necessary. But yeah, he was mostly very well known to generations of alchemists and people who were interested in study of alchemy, and he did also leave behind some philosophical and religious writing. And so I figured. And also, there was a fellow in the early 20th century who was kind of like the Antichrist figure. I forgot his name now.
Oh, was it Aleister Crowley or Crowley?
Yes. And one of his influences was Hermeticism. And it was when I was looking at him and what he was doing for research for that, it was like, oh, what is this? Let me look it up. And I thought it's a legit thing, and it's a thing that could be turned one way or the other. So let me go and have my community of occult practitioner be the then modern day acolyte of this ancient prophet.
Now the book is set to a great deal in Cornwall, which is where this group is located. That's Moriarty's daughter apparently is living with. Why did you choose Cornwall? Is there a special connection for you with that setting, or did it just seem like a good place? Or
it was partially because in the previous book, in book 5, at the very end, Inspector Treadles, who was an important character in that book and who Charlotte had to clear of murderous suspicions of murder, he had told everyone in the end that on the night the murders took place, he was coming back from a compound in Cornwall. And I just thought, it was just a random thing I threw in. But then I thought, you should never overlook random things you've already thrown in, because if you use it, people will actually think that you've plotted out all along. But in fact, no, it's just because you remembered that you had thrown in something random and you want to keep making use of it. So that was how I decided that the compound in Cornwall was going to be something different from what he had thought it was. That instead of a Moriarty property, I wanted to have turned out to be something that Moriarty was also trying to get inside of, which is this religious compound where his daughter is.
Well, you describe it in such fascinating ways because there's these walls that were built that never really came to fruition, but They've got these cottages behind, and yeah, it's just really spooky and atmospheric.
It was interesting because Cornwall, I have never been to Cornwall myself. At least I don't think I have. But it all of the Cornish coast is part of the Southwest Coast Path in England, and it's this national walk. It's this very well maintained trail that goes along the entire southwest coastline of England, and I have hiked about 50 miles of it, and I have seen modern day castles along this trail. Like you just go along and you see here's mountain, here's ocean, and little quaint little fishing villages. And hold on, what is that thing that just a castle just looming ahead? And you go closer to take a look. No, this castle was built in like 1860 by some, I guess, rich person who just wanted a castle. So I figure, the one I saw was probably not the only one in UK. And I figure, so what if you had somebody who like wanted to build a castle but only managed to build a wall? And then the people who wanted to make use of that property, they have to build something inside, and then you have this kind of like slightly prison-like environment. And I thought that would be interesting. Yeah, so it actually came from my inspiration don't often come from real life, but in this instance it did. Yeah,
that's great. As you've built up the Lady Sherlock series, you've developed characters that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created, and you put your own spin on them, like Watson and Charlotte's sisters and her love interest, romantic interest. Which has been the most challenging character for you to kind of reinvent, I guess would be the word?
Most challenging? I did not think Moriarty was easy to write. Okay. I feel like I rewrote his first meeting with Charlotte a little more than I wanted to, because I wasn't sure, was he menacing enough? Was he like so menacing he's cartoonish? Is he still a person? Have I made a demigod out of him? It's that kind of concerns when you want to hit the target, but you're not sure, like, okay, if I don't hit it exactly the bullseye, it's okay. But you don't want to have missed the whole target altogether. You don't have to shot an arrow. So yeah, it was kind of difficult to calibrate. I think that's the word I was looking for. It was kind of hard to calibrate Moriarty's characters. You want this person to be really intelligent and really like have this soft but omnipresent menace, but you kind of also don't want him to be like a cartoon character. That was
you want to give him some depth and some unexpected.
Right. Yeah. So like he's still human, but all the more scary because he's still human. Yeah.
Almost all of your adult novels are set either in the Victorian or Edwardian eras. Why that time period? What fascinates you about it?
I could tell you exactly why. It came down to two books. One by Laura Kinsale called The Shadow and the Star, which was set in like 1887, I believe, was the year of the Golden Jubilee. And the other was Judith Ivory's Beast, set in, I think, 1902, and featured ocean crossing. And I think until then, I had read a bunch of other historical romances that was set in various other eras, but I had never read any ones that was set that late in history, like that close to the modern era. And I was immediately smitten. Like, I really like all the modern conveniences. I like the telegraph. I like the telephone. I mean, I was like, I like the mention of electricity and electrical plants in those books, and seriously, the ability to travel rapidly without having to spend half of your life on the road, and regular bathing habits, which I'm sure people in the Middle Ages like they smell fine to each other, but it's just like the modern those of us are a little squeaky about it. So everything conspired to make me like that era. And also I always thought that the late 19th century Britain and current day US is kind of like a curious parallel, because it's all about these worldwide empires at the height of their powers. So yeah, almost declining slightly maybe.
Well, I think you, in one interview, you were quoted as saying technology was sexy back then, and you incorporate a lot of what I find to be fascinating historical tidbits in your book. And in the latest one, there's the Maxim gun that makes
Oh yeah. The Maxim gun was like invented almost just in time for me to to make use of it. Yeah, I wanted a piece of weaponry and did not realize this as I researched that the Maxim gun was basically the, it's like the American superior air power. It's what allowed the British colonial expansion in many ways, because you bring out this brute of a machine and you just mow down your opponents by the hundreds. It's a gun with quite a heavy history, but I miniaturized it a little bit and made into a defensive. In fact, when I first put it at the beginning of the book, I was thinking like, I'm not sure what else am I going to do with this. I was like, if I'm only going to put in the beginning of the book, then I'm going to take it out. I think later I quite rejoiced when I realized I could use it again.
And then I don't want to say too much, but you also, this was fascinating to me. You talked about the use of microfilm and the siege of Paris you referenced. And
yes.
I'm thinking if you didn't know this was real, it would be like you had made it up. It was so fantastic.
I know, right? I had known about I think everybody knows about the micro dot photography because we've all heard about the World War II spy, sending a letter in which a period, contained like a whole realm of information. If if the recipient knows which part of it to magnify, but I did not realize that it predated my stories. So I basically thought I'll just give it a try and see, can I use this? And when I saw that I could, and when I saw how well advanced it was, I think I did a dance in place. It was like marvelous. The siege of Paris was like in the early 70s, early 1870s. The French, I do historical research and I have a terrible head for these kind of numbers. So they go out of my head immediately as soon as I finish using the research. So at the for readers who may not be familiar with that part of history, in the siege of Paris during the Franco-Prussian War, the French had established their bases in other cities outside of Paris, but they needed to communicate with people who were stuck inside Paris. So they devised this way of, there's this gentleman who had invented this means of shrinking, of reducing photography to smaller and smaller sizes. His use for them was actually kind of like entertainment, like tiny photography was put into those little photographic devices that you can look through the eye hole and say, oh, you see like pictures of places and whatnot. And that same technology was used to shrink entire documents and later even personal letters down to very tiny postage stamp sized pellicles, what they call them. And they were rolled up and then put on pigeons, carrier pigeons. And the pigeons were then sent into the city of Paris. And they would send like, I think, 10 copies of everything until they receive feedback from inside the city that actually we received this batch, you can send new stuff now. So it's fascinating.
Do you have particular favorite resources that you use for your historical details? Talk about the research that you do, the resources that you use.
The research that I do, I know the folks who are more meticulous might start gasping in horror, but I often start with Wikipedia to see whether there's anything like in general I should know about this topic. And then I go to the sources listed. And another thing is that I make a great deal of use of Google Books because in Google digitized a ton of books in public and private libraries around the world, and so you can see, I can basically search, say, if I want to know train schedules and things like that, I can just search, say, from 1880 to 1886. I can search for railway guides and handbooks and other such things to get like contemporary descriptions of what I'm looking for. So that is very, very useful. For, was it this book or was it the previous book? No, it's a previous book. Previous book in Murder on Cold Street. Part of the setting was a factory. They went and visited a factory in the midst of production, and my critique partner was not happy with my description of the factory. She said it was too scant, too didn't give enough factory feeling at all. So I was like, oh, you want? I was like, how about you find some stuff I could use? And then she did, because she had a subscription to the British newspaper archives that has basically digitized newspaper articles back to the 1700s. So she just did a quick search of various factories in the era and sent me a bunch of PDFs. And so there was like these 3-point fonts. And I was trying to like read through them, finding these details of what it was actually look like inside, your Victorian factories, and to use in my books. So there are tons of resources now for the historical researcher. It's so much easier than 20 years ago when I first started.
I think it was interesting you said you used Wikipedia like 20 or 30 years ago when historical romance writers were doing their research. Some of them would tell me they would go to the children's section of the library and get nonfiction books. And they would read like a book in that, and then they'd look at the bibliography in the back, and that was kind of their early version of Wikipedia, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, because sometimes children's books are really the best. I always remember this book that I got from the local library for my children. It's called A Street Through History or something, and it's what a street would look like prehistory. Then suddenly you see how beautiful it was in Roman times, and then the collapse of the Roman Empire that went back to crapping in the ground again. You go like, oh,
One of, I think, the misperceptions on the part of some readers about the Victorian era is that women had very small circles of influence, that they were only allowed to do certain things, that they were not really players in other spheres like business or science or industry. But you write Charlotte as a strong female, and there were actually historical precedents for that. So can you talk a little bit about the Victorian woman at that time?
I mean, there are so many Victorian women who did so many things. Like in Charlotte's time, there were no female lawyers yet, but there were practicing female doctors. There's like a hospital in London that's staffed mostly with female doctors, and there were already colleges for women. This we're talking about the 1880s and 1890s, the time period I've most often written in, and I still so clearly remember that when I when I wrote a book set in British India, I consulted. And these women went everywhere in the world. I wanted to consult some source material on descriptions of the time, and I asked Meredith Duran, and she gave me this list of travel logs written by Victorian women, and it was like 1,500 titles strong. And this particular woman was a big game hunter. Like, that's seriously all she did. She was in India, and she went to various places to hunt big games and write her very strong opinion of everything that went on. and the thing is, by no means did she give the impression that she's the only one like her. There's none of the "I'm not like other women" kind of vibe to it. So you have to assume that she was actually a wave of a fair number of women who, because of their birth or other good fortunes in life, they had independence and they had independent income, and therefore they actually could do a lot of things, especially toward the later part of the century, closer to the turn of the century.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your writing process, because from what I can discern, it's a rather unique to you process. When you're starting a book, do you know in advance plot points, how you're going to plant clues, who suspects are in the case of your mysteries? Or is it more of an organic, I'm going to write it and see where it goes kind of?
Right. It's kind of there's a term called the pantser. In writing, there's always the outliner versus pantser divide. I used to be a pantser and I pant disastrously. So I have learned that although I cannot outline, I also need to pant like like a conscious panting or whatnot, like a little more structured panting. Cannot just fly blindly into the mist. Like first you get a GPS before you fly into the mist. So I will, since I cannot outline, in the sense that whatever I outline never come to pass, and since I do not have the story vision at the beginning of story to know what's going to happen in the middle or the end, so then I have to basically just start writing with a kernel of an idea. For example, the current book is Lady Sherlock book 7 that I'm writing. Even though book 6 just came out, I'm writing book 7, and the only thing I knew about this book was that I kind of wanted to be set on a boat. I'm not sure why. It just, in the absence of other ideas, you have to go with what you've already got. And the boat seemed as good an idea as any. So I started writing about boats. I started doing a little research on steamer ships of the era, like how big they were, where they went, like amenities, and so on and so forth. And I started to decide, okay, who's going to be in this book? Which of my series regulars can I bring aboard? And then, okay, besides these people, who else needs to be on this boat? Because I don't want my series regulars to be killing each other on this boat. So you got to bring someone else, and you got to decide, okay, who's going to die and who's going to have done it. And I wrote a tiny prologue thinking one person was going to die. And like halfway through my first draft, which was only like 30,000 words, halfway through my first draft, I thought, no, actually, I want this other person who came out of nowhere to die. And then as I abandoned the first draft right as that person's body was discovered, because I thought I wanted one character to investigate it. It turned out, no, I don't want this character investigated. And no, I also don't want whoever I thought had killed him to have killed him. So by this point, I changed so much that most of what written in the first draft, maybe not most, but a lot of it had to be thrown out. So basically, then I start a new draft, knowing what I now know, but still only vaguely. And so we'll go through the process again and see if I can push it much further this time. So that's how I. So now I do sort of know the main of what's going to happen, and I do sort of have an idea how it relates to Sherlock Holmes and Charlotte Holmes and her friends. So now it just matter how I execute it, and I would like to watch some Netflix now because I don't want to work.
I think you've said that for you, writing is like working with clay, because it's not something that's set in stone. You can move things around. So there is.
That's right. Yes, but I do believe you cannot work the same clay infinitely also. So you do have to abandon some clay and grab some new clay sometimes.
Eventually you have to make a pot, yeah, with that. Let's talk a little bit, you have a kind of a unique approach to genre fiction, a theory that you call accelerated karma.
Oh yeah, this was what I thought of ages and ages ago. Yeah, the theory of accelerated karma. Yes, you still remember that? How lovely. So so karma is an Eastern idea, but by now everybody knows what karma is. Karma is, karma is not necessarily, my dogma, age of karma, or that sort of thing. But but the idea of karma is you reap what you sow.
Yeah.
And in Eastern philosophy, they take a longer view of things, in that you may do evil in this world and may be seen not to have been punished in this lifetime. But in the next lifetime, you'll be born as a pincushion and be, suffer nothing but, pins sticking into your entire existence, or, something like that. Obviously, we don't get reborn as pincushions, but that's the general idea, that whatever you deserve is coming to you eventually. And so I always, one day I just suddenly realized, literary fiction often deals with the world as it is. And genre fiction is the world is how we want the world to be if karma actually work on a much more compressed time scale. Like if instead of having to grit your teeth and go, why are these, evildoers not punished? And even if you know that they're going to get it in the next few lifetimes, it still doesn't you don't get to see it. In genre fiction, people who make the good choices, who do the hard work, they reap the reward, and people who are evil, get their comeuppance. And so it's like compressed karma, and which is, very, very satisfying, because we all want good to be rewarded and bad to be punished.
You've been writing for quite a while. If you could change one thing about the publishing business, what would you change?
That is a very interesting question, and that is definitely a question that nobody has ever asked me before. I don't know what, because everything is so dependent on one another, right? It feels like if you change one thing, then you don't know what the consequence is going to be for a chain reaction down the road. But I would like for bookstores to always have a easy and wonderful time selling books. How's that?
That's a very smart answer, Sherry.
Yes.
That. Now, it looks like we do have a few questions from some of those fans tuning in.
Oh, hi, everybody. I'm I can't see either YouTube or Facebook now. So hi, and thank you for being here. Yeah, and please continue, John. Sorry for interrupting.
First question is, if you could ask Sir Arthur Conan Doyle anything about Sherlock Holmes, what would you ask him?
Has he ever had sex?
Oh, that's an interesting.
I mean, wouldn't many of us like to know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was always the flirtation with Irene Adler. I mean, that spark there, but yeah.
What would you ask Arthur Conan Doyle if you could?
Did he really believe in spirits in another world? Because he was fascinated.
The author himself. Not about Sherlock.
Oh, that's Sherlock Holmes.
Okay.
Why was he so mean to Watson?
Why did Watson tolerate it?
Why did Watson tolerate it? Well, I guess that's one of those dysfunctional relationships that
right, the codependent.
Yeah. That was an interesting question. The next one is, do you have one of your characters that you identify with more than the others? So I guess from your Sherlock series, is there one?
I think there's a bit of me in Charlotte. Probably there's I do not have the observational powers. In fact, left to my own devices, I don't notice anything, and which is why this book takes so long to write. But there is a fair bit of me in Charlotte, in the sense that that when you write a character for so long, I think it's inevitable that some of what the writer considers natural reactions or seep in, like to how Charlotte sees the world and how she reacts to the world or not react to it. And yes, there is some of me in Charlotte, although I can do what she does. But temperamentally, there's some resemblance. Yes.
She probably also got her love of cake from you too, I'm guessing.
Oh yes. But I feel like nowadays her love of cake is like an independent thing of its own. I mean, I also really like Chinese food, but I haven't given that to her.
The next question is, do you have a favorite form of social media, and has social media affected you as a writer in any way?
Truthfully speaking, social media is the first thing I forget and the last thing I remember. In normal course of things, I am on it a little more around release time, just because it seems like that is the writer's obligation nowadays. But I don't. I'm not sure whether my age has something to do with it. But I just like didn't grow up around a lot of cameras, and I'm not in the habit of taking too many pictures. And the idea of filming myself is really still to this day kind of strange. So to be on social media, you have to generate content, and that is work for somebody who prefers to consume. Like if I like. I had to find creative work, basic content generation of any kind, rather tiring. So I would prefer to just sit back and eat my bonbons and consume other people's content. So social media is actually difficult for me. It's something I have to remember and to remind myself to do. And I don't do it very well even when I do it. I'm just doing the bare minimum, basically. So I wouldn't say I have a favorite social. Maybe Twitter is my favorite, because you actually, it's not very graphic driven. You can just type a few words and be done with. Not like if you want to post on Instagram, you got to come up with a photograph, and good lord. It's not particularly in my wheelhouse. So I wouldn't say social media has changed me much at all, since I use it. I don't use it very much, and sometimes it will be like 6 months will go by, and I'll suddenly realize, I haven't done any social media during this time at all. Like, woo.
The next question is, are you planning on writing any more young adult books?
Yes, I do plan on writing young adult books. I mean, and I don't mean a nebulous plan. I actually have a fairly concrete plan for when I want to write the next young adult book, but let's see how it does when I get there. I hope to spend some time coming up with a draft of a young adult book in 2022.
Yeah. I got another question that asks, if you could change one thing about your relationship with your publisher, what would it be?
If I could change one thing about my relationship with my publisher, my publisher has done pretty well by me, I believe. That said, this is a business. It's a business relationship, so I don't go in it expecting to be treated with either kid gloves or cookies and flowers or such things like that. I want my books to be supported, and I have to say the Lady Sherlock books have been very well supported by my publisher. If I would change one thing about them, is that they can actually just go ahead and take over my social media if they don't mind.
Well, it really is the last 20 years. Before that, writers wrote, and that was all they did. Publishers.
Yes.
But now you're expected to take an act on that,
which is okay. Like, the way I think is, if they will accept the crappy social media that I do, then I will continue to do the crappy social media that I do.
Another question is, what have you been doing to keep yourself happy during the pandemic? So I guess is there something like, have you discovered a television show, or are you gardening? What is your key to staying sane during the pandemic? That's how I would.
This is a very I used to think people should disconnect more, but more recently I've been listening to some podcasts, and that made me realize, okay, people are built differently. Some people, connecting is their strength.
Yeah.
It's part of who they are. If you tell them to just unplug, to just don't be so in touch with the outside world, that's might be actually more torture to them than it is for them to keep knowing what's going on in the outside world, even if it makes them a little anxious. How I find I've always been rather good, more on the other end of the spectrum. I'm very good at disconnecting from the outside world, whether it's news like this or other general upheaval in the world. I think I do what I can, and then I don't need to know any more of what's going on, because I only need to know enough to know what I should do. If whatever news I get does not change what I should do, there's no need for me to get any more news than that. So then once I finish my engagement with the outside world, in my participation in it, for example, I write postcards to voters. So once I finish my weekly allotment, then I don't need to know any more what's going on. I just need to look after my family, look after myself, and remember that there are still many good and beautiful things in this world, and that pandemics don't last forever. They seem to in the midst of it, but people outlasted even the Black Death, and the flu pandemic in the 100 years ago, even though it was really horrible, also kind of just went away after a while, and life did go back to normal.
I guess before
and sorry, whoever asked that question, I hope I hope you find your own ways of feeling happier.
Yeah, I think this whole past couple of years has given people a lot of opportunities to reflect on what is important in their lives and what changes they can make or what they can choose to do. So sometimes you have to look at the glass half full instead of half empty.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, and I have been very fortunate in the sense that I already did my work, already just work from home, and I am I guess introverted enough that like just seeing my family is most of the time enough social interactions for me.
The last question before we wrap things up from one of your viewers is, do you have any hobbies?
Do I have any hobbies? I love to read, of course. But I don't have too many book recommendations to give right now, because I've been mostly reading Chinese web novels the past few years. And I love to read. I like any kind of storytelling. So I like to watch movies, watch TV series, and in recent years, I also started a bullet journal, because it's just sometimes things like that just suddenly mature in your life. You just have an overwhelming urge to do it, right? A friend of mine came to visit, and she had a bullet journal, and I don't think I was particularly interested in the bullet journal at the point, but I was blown away by her washi tape, washi tape is this beautifully patterned roll tape, decorative tape, and I lusted after these washi tapes so much that I started a bullet journal just so that I could find some uses for like the washi tape I was buying. And then I kind of like got together with a couple of like-minded writers who also enjoyed who also had bullet journal or some other kind of journaling. And so on Saturdays, we would get together and we'll show each other our latest collection in decorative stickers and washi tapes. And this thing just ballooned until now we're doing wax seal stamps. And, I'm doing like a collage on all my journal pages. And so it's what else have we learned how to do? I even learned to draw a little bit, and I thought I was the worst artist. I learned to draw and paint a little bit for my bullet journal. So I think basically I realized there was a severe lack of beauty in my life. Like with my house, the most I could do is keep it neat. It's not decorated at all. I was like, there's no beauty in my life. And suddenly, I just latch onto my bullet journal as a place where I could have a little bit of beauty and also not generate too much stuff around the house.
In many ways, that's so emblematic of you as a person, Sherry. Now, I think you've said you have another Lady Sherlock book in the works, so readers can look forward to that.
That is correct, yes.
Anything else you want to tell readers about what's coming up for you, or is that enough?
I want to tell readers that because very often, I mean, not that often, a few times a year, I would get emails of readers asking, oh, is this the last book in the series? And I would have to talk back, say, no, this is not the last book in the series. Knock on wood, we should have, quite a few more books in the series yet. Of course, contracts have been signed 2 or 3 books at a time, but fingers crossed, book 6 nor book 7 will be anywhere near the last book in the series. So folks don't have to ask me, is this the last? It's not. It won't be for a while.
Well, that is wonderful news. And on that terrific note, I want to thank Sherry for joining us today at the Poison Pen. And thank you for tuning in and listening. And again, we have copies of Sherry's new book, Miss Moriarty, I presume, available. I know Sherry would love to have you purchase a copy, as with the Poison Pen. Thank you, Sherry,
yes,
for joining us.
Thank you so much, John. It's always such a delight to speak to you. And thank you so much, everybody. I can't see you, but thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for supporting independent bookstores like the Poison Pen. Please do. If not my book, then please buy something else from them for hosting this lovely program.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning in.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.